Millionaire CEO needs a date to his ex's wedding. He picks a random girl and can't stop staring at her. I am sorry, miss, but without an invitation, I cannot let you inside. Emily froze in place, her hand still on the strap of her modest beige purse. Her cheeks burned under the sharp gaze of the doorman in a black suit, whose outstretched arm blocked her from taking another step into the Grand Hotel ballroom. Behind him, the warm golden lights, soft laughter, and glinting champagne flutes felt like a world far out of reach. I swear, I was told this was the right date, she said quickly. It was supposed to be my friend's wedding. Her name is... I understand, the doorman said, already glancing past her. But we are working off a list. If your name is not on it, it is not about the name, she blurted. I think I just mixed up the date. I thought it was next weekend. That would explain the confusion, he replied, trying to be polite but clearly motioning for her to step aside. You'll need to come back when the event you were invited to is actually happening. Emily sighed and began to turn, mortified. Then, behind them, a deep voice cut through the awkwardness like a blade. She's with me. The doorman spun around. Emily blinked in surprise. Standing a few feet away was a tall man in a sharply cut navy suit, collar open, no tie, hair perfectly tousled. His eyes, gray, cool, unreadable, were focused not on the doorman, but directly on her. I'm sorry? The doorman asked. Jake Bennett, Billionaire CEO, took a step forward. He adjusted the cuff of his jacket, then looked to Emily, then back at the man. She's my date. Emily's eyes widened. What? Jake stepped beside her and leaned in just enough for her to hear him whisper, Pretend to be my date. I'll explain later. Emily stared at him. Her brain scrambled to catch up. Say no, she thought. This is crazy. But the heat from the glares behind her, the growing crowd, and the sheer absurdity of the moment pressed on her ribs like a dare. Okay, she whispered back. Jake turned to the doorman with a nod. We're going in. The man hesitated, then stepped aside. Of course, Mr. Bennett. Apologies. Emily didn't have time to ask who he was. Jake's hand touched the small of her back, gently but firmly, and guided her forward. They walked together through the massive gold-trimmed doors, entering the reception hall just as a violin quartet began another song. Inside, guests turned to look. Emily could feel eyes land on her like snowflakes, cool, quiet, accumulating. She wasn't wearing designer. Her shoes were scuffed at the heel. She had a paper-wrapped package still clutched under one arm, a gift she had brought for someone else's wedding. Are you always this impulsive? She muttered. Jake chuckled, low and smooth. Only when I am cornered. Did you really just adopt a date? I saved a guest from embarrassment, he replied, and myself from walking in here alone. Emily risked a glance up at him. He didn't look flustered. If anything, he looked completely in control. Are you actually supposed to be here? Very much so. My ex is getting married. This is her big night. Oh, Emily said, then blinked. But your ex? Long story. And now I am your fake date? He looked down at her. Unless you'd rather go back outside and finish your argument with security. She pressed her lips together. Nope. Let's go with fake date. Lead the way, stranger. They moved through the ballroom, heading toward the central seating area. Jake's presence seemed to part the crowd with ease. People smiled, nodded. Emily felt like she was floating through a movie scene. It was surreal, awkward, and, if she was being honest, a little thrilling. She was supposed to be running a bookstore event tomorrow. Instead, she had just crash-landed into the arms of a man who looked like he belonged on a magazine cover. By the way, he said, guiding her toward a pair of empty chairs. What's your name? Emily, she replied. Nice to meet you, Emily. I'm Jake. I guessed, she said dryly. You look like someone who doesn't need name tags. He smiled. And for the first time that evening, so did she. The moment they found a quiet corner near the floral archway at the far end of the ballroom, Emily exhaled like she had been holding her breath since the door opened. The clinking of glasses and soft hum of string surrounded them, but it all seemed distant. Her focus was on the man next to her. "So," she said, adjusting the strap of her dress, "I guess we're fake dating now." Jake glanced at her, amused. "Seems that way. Are we winging it, or are we going to, commit to the illusion?" He turned fully to her, hands in his pockets. "Good point. Let's get our story straight. How did we meet?" Emily tapped her finger on her chin, thinking. "The bookstore. I was in the poetry section. You knocked over a stack of biographies trying to reach something." Jake smirked. "That sounds more like something you'd do." "Fine. I knocked over the stack. You offered to help pick them up. We started talking. And you thought I was charming and mysterious." Emily rolled her eyes. "You asked me out for coffee because I looked like someone who knew the difference between Miles Davis and John Coltrane." Jake chuckled. "Jazz fans. I like it." He extended his hand with mock formality. "Jake Bennett, CEO jazz enthusiast, poetry aisle hero." She shook it, grinning. "Emily Hart, freelance book nerd and current accidental wedding crasher." They let go, but not before he gave her fingers the slightest squeeze. She felt it all the way up her spine. As they slowly moved toward the refreshment table, Jake asked casually, "So what were you really doing here, before I hijacked your evening?" Emily hesitated, then shrugged. "Long story, short version, I thought my friend's wedding was today, got the dates mixed up, came early, got embarrassed, was about to be thrown out when you appeared like a very well-dressed hallucination." Jake gave a soft laugh, "And instead of running, you stayed." "Only because I didn't know who you were." He raised an eyebrow. "I mean, I've seen your name in headlines," she clarified, "but you didn't look like the kind of guy who'd pretend to have a date just to avoid awkward questions." "Well," he said, reaching for 2 glasses of champagne and handing her one, "I surprised us both." They clinked glasses. The moment was oddly comfortable for strangers. The air between them didn't feel forced, just a little unexpected. Emily took a sip, her eyes scanning the room. "So, this is your ex's wedding. Brave move, showing up." Jake's jaw flexed slightly, but he didn't flinch. "I didn't come for drama, just closure." She looked at him more closely now. For all the polish and poise, there was something tired in his eyes. Something that didn't quite match the image. "Well," she said gently, "you've got a pretty convincing date now. I can make exes jealous in under 10 minutes. Jake smiled. It was small, quiet, but real. "You already have." They stood side by side, sipping champagne in the corner of someone else's fairy tale. Emily couldn't help but think, tonight, for once, she was not invisible. She wasn't the forgotten cousin or the awkward outsider. For a few hours, she was someone worth noticing. And Jake could not stop noticing her. The ballroom buzzed with music and laughter as more guests streamed in. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above them, casting glints of gold across the polished marble floor. Waiters in crisp black uniforms moved like shadows, their silver trays dotted with champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres. The air was rich with perfume, the soft hum of a string quartet, and carefully rehearsed cheer. But the moment Jake and Emily stepped fully into the light of the main aisle, the air changed. It was instant, an almost imperceptible shift in energy that swept through the room like a sharp wind. Conversations faltered, heads turned, first out of curiosity, then in surprise, then into something else entirely. Champagne glasses paused mid-air. Smiles stiffened. The temperature didn't drop, but it felt like it did. And then, from the head table, a voice cut through the hush like a shard of glass. "What is she doing here?" The tone was sharp, unmistakably familiar, and it froze Emily where she stood. Her spine stiffened as her name wasn't said, but hung in the air like smoke. She turned, slowly. Lauren. There she stood in white lace, her veil pushed back, her mouth slightly parted in horror, confusion, and something dangerously close to rage. The perfect bridal image crumpled in the blink of an eye. Jake didn't flinch. He looked straight at Lauren, his voice calm and level. "She's my date." A second wave moved through the crowd, murmurs this time, low, vicious, more honest than polite. "That's Emily Hart, right?" A woman whispered behind a gloved hand. "The cousin no one talks about? I heard her dad lost everything. She always looked out of place," said another. "The one who dropped out of med school. She's crashing?" "No. Jake Bennett brought her?" Emily heard every word. They didn't even try to hide it. Her ears rang with it, each phrase a reminder of everything she had fought so hard to overcome. The heat rose in her face, but her posture stayed upright. She'd come too far to let them see her shrink. Jake leaned in close to her ear, his voice low but steady. "Are you okay?" She nodded, her jaw locked tight. "I've been through worse." But he didn't miss the way her hands curled slightly, fingernails biting into her palm. Before he could say more, Lauren descended from the head table, her smile tight and artificial. She stopped just short of them, her eyes flicking between Jake and Emily like she couldn't decide who to confront first. "Jake?" she said sweetly. Too sweet. "Can I borrow you for a second?" Jake looked at Emily as if asking permission. She nodded once. "I'll be right here." He followed Lauren to a quiet corner near the towering cake display, close enough for Emily to still see them, but far enough for privacy. She watched them go, her expression carefully neutral even as her chest ached. Lauren turned the second they were out of earshot. "I didn't think you'd actually show." Jake said nothing. "I thought maybe a part of you still," her voice softened, "still missed what we had." Jake's expression didn't waver. "That part died the day you treated someone like her as invisible." Lauren blinked, thrown. "What?" "You always talked about how family was everything, but you let them tear her down. You let them call her names, ignore her, exclude her, and you said nothing. She was always so different." Jake cut her off. "That's not a flaw, that's her strength." Lauren's face flushed, but she kept her voice low. "You're making a scene." Jake shook his head. "No, Lauren, you made this scene. You just didn't expect her to show up with someone who sees her value." He didn't wait for a reply. He turned and walked straight back to Emily, his steps purposeful. When he reached her, he wrapped one arm around her waist, not gently, but with certainty, public, undeniable. Then, loud enough for Lauren and half the room to hear, he said, "This is the woman I want by my side now." Emily looked up at him, startled. But Jake wasn't pretending anymore. His eyes, soft but fierce, said everything. Lauren stood frozen, lips parted, no words coming this time. Jake didn't look back. He led Emily through the sea of murmurs and stares, through the noise of a room that had once tried to define her. And for the first time, Emily wasn't walking behind anyone else's story. She was writing her own. The reception roared behind them, laughter, clinking glasses, the violinist switching to a livelier tempo, but Emily barely noticed. Her heels clicked softly against the stone patio outside as she stepped into the evening air, drawing a shaky breath. Jake followed her, loosening the top button of his shirt. "Emily, wait." She stopped near the railing, overlooking the ocean. The moonlight painted silver streaks across the water. Her shoulders rose and fell once, then again, as if trying to settle the storm inside her. Jake stepped closer. "Talk to me." She didn't look at him right away. Her eyes were fixed on the waves crashing below. "I wasn't even invited," she said quietly. Jake frowned. "What?" Emily turned. Her voice didn't tremble, but it carried the kind of tired edge that came from wounds that never healed clean. "I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. I didn't get an invite. No call, no message. My mom just asked me to drop off a gift for the bride, that was all." She let out a humorless laugh. "A gift. To a wedding I wasn't welcome at." Jake's expression tightened. "Why?" Emily looked away. "Because I'm not part of the real family. That's what they used to say. My dad lost everything in a business collapse when I was 12. Divorce followed. My mom raised me alone. No country club, no annual ski trips. Just me, her, and bills." Jake stayed silent, listening. "They never let me forget it," she continued. "Lauren was always the golden girl, the one with the perfect grades, perfect hair, perfect everything. I was just the messy cousin, quiet, poor, forgettable. At family reunions, I was the extra chair they had to drag out. Could the sympathy invite? She looked at him now. Eventually, they stopped inviting me altogether. Jake's jaw clenched. That's cruel. Emily shrugged. It's just life. He moved closer, gently placing his glass down on the nearby table. No, that's not just life. That's how people justify treating others like they're less. She met his eyes. You saw how they looked at me tonight, like I was a stain on their perfect tablecloth. Jake didn't argue. He couldn't. She was right. He had felt the stares, the whispers, the judgment that seeped from the room like perfume. But he also saw something else. You didn't flinch, he said. Not once. You stood there like you belonged, because you do. Emily swallowed hard, suddenly unsure what to do with the way his voice softened around her. Jake took a breath. Maybe they don't see your worth, but I do. She froze. You could have walked away, you could have hidden, but instead you stayed, you stood by me, you held your head high in front of people who never gave you a seat at their table. His voice dropped, sincere and low. That takes more strength than anyone in that ballroom has ever shown. Emily blinked quickly, trying to clear the sting in her eyes. Why does that mean so much coming from you? Jake looked at her, not blinking. Because I know what it's like to be surrounded by people who clap when you succeed, but disappear when you fall. I've lived in rooms full of applause and felt completely alone. And tonight, I wasn't. A silence stretched between them, quiet, thick with something unspoken. Emily stepped closer, her voice softer. You're not like I thought. Jake's mouth curled into something between a smirk and a smile. Neither are you. She tilted her head. So what now, Mr. CEO? Jake extended his hand slowly. Now we go back inside, as equals. Emily hesitated, then slipped her fingers into his. Warm, steady. They walked back into the light, not pretending anymore. And this time, it was not about making anyone jealous. It was about standing next to someone who finally saw her. The ballroom glowed with laughter and clinking glasses as toasts were raised for the third time that evening. Emily sat quietly beside Jake, hands folded in her lap, her smile polite but distant. Across the table, the scrutiny had sharpened. You know, a woman in a pearl-studded dress said suddenly, leaning forward with her wine glass tilted, it's sweet, really, how far some girls will go to get noticed. Emily looked up, startled. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. I mean, finding a billionaire boyfriend just in time for your estranged cousin's wedding. That's a Netflix pitch if I've ever heard one. A few soft laughs fluttered from other guests. Another voice joined, lower but crueler. She always did know how to pick her moments. Always watching, always waiting for her chance. Emily's throat tightened. She glanced toward Jake, unsure whether to respond or simply leave the table altogether. Before she could decide, Jake stood. The scrape of his chair echoed across the table. The music continued playing, but the room's attention quietly shifted. Jake placed one hand gently on Emily's shoulder, the other resting on the back of her chair. His voice was low, calm, but carried like thunder. Careful what you say, he said, looking directly at the woman in pearls. You're insulting the woman I love. The table fell into silence. Emily's heart slammed in her chest. It was pretend, wasn't it? But Jake didn't blink, didn't waver. The words hung between them, heavy and electric. No one dared speak. Even the servers slowed as they passed. Jake leaned slightly closer, and though he wasn't speaking to anyone in particular anymore, his voice was for Emily alone. She is the only honest thing I've seen in this entire room. He straightened and walked away from the table. Emily followed, her legs slightly unsteady. Outside, beneath the strings of lights decorating the patio, she caught up to him. Jake, she said, her voice tight. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. No, you didn't, she snapped. I'm used to it, the whispers, the looks. That's not new. Jake turned to face her, jaw clenched. And that's exactly the problem. Emily crossed her arms. You can't just protect me like that. It makes me feel weak, like I need saving. He stepped closer. I didn't do it to save you. I did it because you deserved someone who will not sit quietly while others try to tear you down." Emily stared at him, chest heaving slightly. Then, softer, "But you said it, out loud, in front of everyone." Jake's eyes met hers. Maybe it wasn't a lie. She froze. Before she could respond, another figure approached. Lauren. Her eyes glistened, not from joy, but something that bordered regret. "Jake," she said, almost breathless, "I was wrong." Jake said nothing. "I let people talk me out of us," Lauren continued. "I let pride and image get in the way. Maybe it's not too late." Jake looked at her for a long moment. Not angry, just still. "It's not too late for you to be better," he said softly. "But it's far too late for me to come back." Lauren blinked, stung. Jake turned away without another word. He returned to Emily, who hadn't moved. He took her hand without hesitation this time, and when their eyes met, there was no more pretending. The room behind them blurred. Only one truth remained between them now. They were no longer acting. The night air was crisp, laced with the scent of ocean salt and blooming gardenia. The laughter from the ballroom behind them faded as Jake and Emily walked further down the stone path, winding through the resort's moonlit gardens. Neither of them spoke at first. Their footsteps echoed softly on the path. Emily's heels clicked in time with the rustle of palm fronds above. Jake's jacket was draped over her shoulders now, his tie loosened, hands in his pockets. Emily finally broke the silence. "You always run from weddings like this?" Jake gave a soft chuckle. "Only the ones where the bride used to sleep on my chest." Emily glanced at him. "That's weirdly poetic." Jake sighed. "We were together for 3 years. I thought she was the one, but I wasn't the one for her, not really. Why not?" He paused, then looked up at the sky. "Because she didn't love who I was, just the idea of me, the CEO, the clean suit, the magazine covers. I gave her the version of me that everyone applauded. Perfection. And it worked. Until it didn't." Emily walked a few more steps in silence, then gently, "So what did you learn from it?" Jake looked at her. That perfection is exhausting, that truth is messy, and that sometimes messy is what's real. She stopped walking. He stopped beside her. The path had opened up into a quiet courtyard, lit only by a few low-hanging lanterns strung between the trees, casting golden circles across the pavement. Emily turned to face him. "Then what do you see in someone like me?" Jake didn't hesitate. "You're real. You don't care about headlines or money or what kind of suit I wear. You didn't try to impress anyone tonight, even when they tried to humiliate you." His voice lowered. "You make me wish this was real, and that scares the hell out of me." Emily's breath caught. Jake stepped closer, his hands still in his pockets. "You crashed into my evening like a storm. No planning, no agenda, and somehow, for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe around someone." He finally let his hands fall, one of them gently brushing her arm, just enough to ask for permission. Emily didn't move away. "I'm scared too," she said quietly. "But for a moment tonight, I didn't feel small. Or less. I felt seen." Jake tilted his head, eyes locked on hers. "That's because you are." She took one step closer. He took the last, and under the soft amber glow of the hanging lights, Jake leaned in slowly, carefully, and kissed her. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic. It was real, warm, steady, filled with everything they had not said all night. Emily's fingers curled around the lapels of his open jacket as she kissed him back. His hand settled at her waist, grounding them both. When they finally pulled apart, she didn't step back. Jake looked at her, voice barely above a whisper. "Still think you're just the wrong girl at the wrong wedding?" Emily smiled, breathless. "No, I think I was exactly where I was supposed to be." They stood there for a long moment, swaying slightly in the quiet, as the rest of the world spun somewhere far away. Emily zipped up her overnight bag with trembling hands, her back turned to the soft morning light spilling through the hotel curtains. Dust motes floated in the golden beam, gentle and aimless, so unlike the storm swirling inside her. The silence of the suite was deafening now. The laughter from last night, the slow dancing, the kiss under the lanterns, it all felt too fragile in the light of day, like a dream unraveling with every second. She moved slowly, deliberately, folding Jake's jacket, smoothing out the sleeves, pressing it flat like a goodbye. She laid it across the bed and stood there a moment longer, letting her fingers linger on the fabric. His scent still clung to it, clean, warm, faintly like cedar and something more personal she hadn't quite named. Then she grabbed her bag, slipped on her flats, and walked quietly out the door. In the hallway, the hotel's polished elegance suddenly felt impersonal. She pressed the elevator button and stared at her reflection in the golden sheen of the doors. Her ponytail was a mess, her face bare, her eyes tired, not from lack of sleep, but from trying too hard not to hope. She looked like a girl who had made a mistake, a girl who had let herself believe just for one night that she could belong in someone else's world. Behind her, a familiar voice cut through the quiet. "Running?" Emily flinched. She turned to find Jake standing at the far end of the hall. He looked nothing like the polished CEO from last night, dressed in a plain dark t-shirt and jeans, barefoot, hair tousled from sleep. He held something in his hand, a folded piece of paper that looked suspiciously like, "I wasn't," she started, then sighed. "Yes." He walked toward her slowly, not with anger, not with urgency, just with the quiet gravity of someone who had already made up his mind. "Emily," he said, stopping a few feet away, it wasn't about convenience, it was clarity, and I don't want you walking out of here thinking you were some kind of stand-in." She crossed her arms, trying to stay composed. "Jake, you're going back to your world, boardrooms, charities, red carpets. I was just the right distraction at the wrong time." Jake shook his head. "You weren't a distraction. You were the only part that made sense." He unfolded the paper in his hand and held it out. "I found this in Lauren's suite, the invitation they sent to your mom. I flipped it over." Emily took it, puzzled. Her breath caught when she saw the handwritten note on the back. Elegant, precise, cold. "You'll never belong here." She stared at it, her chest tightening. Jake stepped closer. "She meant it to hurt you, to remind you that no matter how close you got, you'd never be enough for them." Emily's grip on the paper trembled. Jake reached into his back pocket and pulled out a silver lighter. With one flick, the flame came to life. Without looking away from her, he lit the corner of the invitation. Emily's eyes widened. "Jake, I'm not letting them define where you belong," he said, voice steady. The flame curled up the edges of the thick cardstock, turning cruelty into smoke. He let it burn nearly to his fingers, then dropped the remnants into a nearby brass waste bin. "She was right," he said, looking into her eyes. "You don't belong there, but you belong with me." Tears blurred her vision. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do. For the first time in a long time, I know exactly what I want, and it's not the polished life people expect from me. It's real mornings and messy hair and honest conversations. It's you." She looked down, trying to catch her breath. "I'm scared." He reached for her hand, curling his fingers around hers. "So am I, but I'm done letting fear be louder than truth." Her fingers squeezed his back. The elevator behind her pinged and opened with a soft chime. But she didn't move, because this time she wasn't walking away. This time she had been chosen, for all the right reasons. 6 months later, the chaos of that wedding night had faded into something softer, like an old song you still remember the lyrics to, even if you no longer feel the sting. Emily Hart was no longer the girl who didn't belong. She was now the communications director for the Bennett Foundation, a nonprofit Jake had quietly launched in memory of his late sister. It focused on educational access and community development, and Emily had brought it to life in ways Jake had never imagined. They worked side by side, fighting for causes, writing grants, visiting schools and shelters and small towns with big hearts. And somewhere between airports and field reports, between laughter in hotel lobbies and arguments over messaging tone, their love deepened, not fast, but real. Now they were in Ecuador, visiting a school the foundation had rebuilt after a flood. Emily stood in the courtyard with her sleeves rolled up, talking with local teachers and taking photos with kids who hung off her arms like vines. Jake watched her from across the yard. She was radiant, covered in dust and sunlight. When she finally turned and caught his gaze, he nodded slightly. "Walk with me?" he said, gesturing toward the tree-lined path just beyond the schoolyard. She smiled and joined him, wiping her hands on her jeans. They walked in silence for a while, their fingers brushing now and then, until Jake reached into his bag and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "I've been meaning to give this back," he said. Emily frowned slightly as he handed it to her. She opened it and froze. Inside was the necklace her mother had given her when she turned 18, a thin chain with a small pendant shaped like a book, her mother's quiet way of saying, "You belong to stories, and stories belong to you." She had lost it 2 years ago, thought it had been left on a train or slipped behind a dresser during a move. Her voice caught. "How did you—" Jake smiled. "I found it in a pocket of your overnight bag. I've had it since the night you left the hotel." She looked up at him, stunned. "You told me once," he continued, "that it was the only thing that made you feel like part of a family, that when you wore it, you didn't feel invisible." Her hand closed around the pendant, tears building behind her eyes. "I kept it because I didn't want you to lose that feeling," Jake said, "but now I think it belongs back where it came from." Then he pulled something else from his other pocket, a small box. Emily's breath hitched. Jake opened it slowly. Inside sat a simple gold ring, elegant and timeless. "No big speeches," he said softly. "No PR stunts. No perfect timing." He took a step closer. "You didn't crash a wedding, Emily. You rescued my heart from being numb. You reminded me that love isn't perfect. It's brave, messy, beautiful, and I want that for the rest of my life." He dropped to one knee. "Will you marry me?" Emily covered her mouth with one hand. Her other clutched the necklace tightly. Then she laughed through her tears and nodded, whispering, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They kissed under the thick green canopy of the trees, kids still laughing faintly in the distance. 3 months later, they married in a garden filled with books instead of flowers. Guests brought novels to donate to community libraries. There was no headline, no magazine deal, just family, real family, and friends who had seen them become something extraordinary. At the entrance to the ceremony stood a framed photograph. It was a grainy security camera still. Slightly wet from rain, standing awkwardly in a hotel lobby, clutching a gift bag. In her hand, an invitation with no name. Her face was nervous, uncertain, but her eyes still believed in something better. Below the photo, a single line of gold script read, "Kindness is never wasted. It writes stories even when no one is reading." As Emily walked down the aisle, hair loose around her shoulders, Jake waited at the altar in a gray suit and open collar. His hands were steady, his eyes never left hers. When she reached him, he leaned close and whispered, "Still think you don't belong?" She smiled through tears. "I think I was always meant to rewrite what belonging means." And together they began their forever. Not from perfection, but from truth. Not from headlines, but from heart. From pretend to forever. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that love can begin in the most unexpected places, and that every person deserves to feel chosen, then you're already part of what we believe in. At Soul Stirring Stories, we bring you true-to-heart tales of resilience, quiet courage, and love that doesn't follow the rules but always finds a way. Subscribe to the channel now for more emotional, unforgettable stories just like this one. Turn on notifications and join our growing family of story lovers who believe in the power of kindness, second chances, and soul-deep connection. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep believing in love that begins with truth.